Greetings and welcome. We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we strive to bring you the real truth, the whole truth, and nothing but that truth, with no hype, fluff, or other baloney. Our mission policy is, quote, honesty is our best policy, unquote, and we strongly strive to stand by that. And we believe that a man's word is his word and should be honoured by himself and by others. Honourable, taken as honourable, and a foundation for something to be grounded in. It's called old, or known as old chivalry. We understand, though, as we hope you do, we are human, we are all flawed, we are prone to making mistakes sometimes. But, quote, to err is human, but to forgive is divine, unquote. It's probably by Shakespeare. So many mistakes brought to our attention by you, perhaps by you, is much appreciated, and we will examine them to verify that they're actually mistakes that we've made, and then remedy them, and thank you, acknowledge you for bringing that to our attention. Any we make at the Ministry of the Real Truth within our creative videos, we will rectify as soon as possible when detected. Sometimes we detect it after we've made the video. One of our people or someone else points it out, and we put the correct definition or translation or meaning or whatever the mistake was underneath that video in the description area. Many people have told us, and we've heard via live streams, that they've read in this case the Americanized Bible versions, anywhere from once to 2 times to 25 times. We question why. Well, okay, we'll take your word for it, but after 2 or 3 times, don't you think you'd know it pretty well? Okay. We question that claim, and we try to verify if it's true or and take the word for it at that time, but listen intently to what they say in regard to what they've read and come to fully understand. Have they understood exactly what is being said or written and said in the audio videos uploaded or via live streams, or are they just exaggerating or telling a load of hogwash? As many, when questioned on their claims, haven't and have often skipped certain passages or books in the Bible because some are boring. For example, one book in particular, which is a Hebrew or Israelite lineage or history list of all the forefathers and the descendants and their descendants and their descendants and their descendants. So you become monotonous, tedious and boring. So you tend to skip it. If we ask, did they read this or that or that or this, to truly know what it took to bring them the particular translation that they are reading from, etc., or quoting, we find that they can't relay us anything in regard to what we asked, in regard to its content, or they eventually admit they've never actually read it, the whole Bible. Okay, they've never read that portion, and yeah, so they haven't read the entire Bible. That's what it boils down to. Okay, it is an established fact that when people read any book, let's say as an example, a historical book or War at Peace by Tolstoy, because of its massive volume of content, will skip certain chapters or pages, and it can be deemed by them trivial, unimportant, even monotonous and totally boring, irrelevant, etc. A lot of times people have misunderstood or words not defined, or they haven't defined particular words that they're struggling with, they don't understand, okay, they don't have a definition for it, so grow bored, tired, yawn and lose focus and discontinue reading. I think I stuff this and throw it aside, but especially when you're studying for exams or something like that. So today we look first at the N.I.V. Study Bible. This is the one we have here. Yes, it's a maroon colour. Okay. N.I.V. Study Bible by Zonda Van Publishers. The New International Version, Words of Christ in Red Letter. Yeah. It's got a concordance or something like that in it. Because many people say we've read the Bible from cover to cover. This particular Bible, for example, just an example. When we ask them, question them, okay, what does it say in the first couple of pages after the obviously the title, the name of the book, right, and so forth, the preface and the introduction. Again, they can't tell us what it actually says, so they don't fully understand why a new version was put together, right, by a certain committee of people that were appointed to do that, translators, the editors, etc., etc. Okay, what it took, or why they did it, what it took, what they are saying in there. Is it true, or are they like false? Okay, and then we have here, okay, got contributors, the abbreviations, not so much important, but yeah, it's good to peruse. Ancient texts relating to Old Testament, okay, and then basically the books of the Old Testament onto the New Testament. Okay, so these people, they can't tell us what the copyright says, what the preface or the introduction says, or all of those. Okay, so they haven't read the entire Bible. Okay. And they might say, oh, it's not important. Well, it actually is when we go through it and tell you about it, so you have a full understanding of why, how, when, who, etc. this translation was put out, what it took to bring you that translation. So in this N.I.V, we have, like all the other ones, say if you got confirmed through the Roman Catholic Church or whatever like that, and this book was gifted to you by the pastor or the priest or whoever, right? It's got the old presented to, you put your name in there and all that sort of stuff. Okay, it belongs to you on a certain date. Got holy matrimony, when you got engaged, when you got married. It's like a marriage certificate. Births, baptisms, you fill all that out. Special events, church record, or whatever that is. And if you died, somebody in your family died, and you got the Old Testament chronology from creation to birth of Christ, death of Christ, his ministry, etc. Right? You got N.I.V, General Editor Kenneth Barker, etc., etc. Zondervan Publishing House in the USA, the publishers. Okay, and it's got a little bit of information here on the inside here that's really important. It may seem trivial, but it is important, as you'll see in a moment. It goes on about the copyright, the maps and all that sort of stuff, that the certain group, the International Bible Society, had the copyrights from 1973 to 1984, and so forth, on the artwork, etc., whatever is contained in it. The N.I.V and New International Version trademarks are registered in the United States Patent and Trademark Office by International Bible Society, so they're American. They're American based, like the American Bible Society. Okay, so they'll be pretty similar to them, right? Use of either trademark requires the permission of the International Bible Society. The N.I.V text may be quoted in any form, written, visual, electronic or audio, any type of media, up to and inclusive of 500 verses, without express written permission of the publisher, providing the verses quoted do not amount to a complete book of the Bible. So if you see, say, us like something copied and pasted on Notepad, or a comment, underneath the comments, right, and it's got like every verse more or less from the Old Testament and the New Testament, right, and you didn't put where'd you get it from, where you got it from, your source, KJV or N.I.V, whatever, then if they saw that, they could possibly do you for copyright breach. Okay, I don't really think they'll do that, but you just never know. So the N.I.V text may be quoted in any form, written, visual, electronic or audio, up to and inclusive of 500 verses, without expressed written permission of the publisher, providing the verses quoted do not amount to a complete book of the Bible, nor do the verses quoted account for 25% or more of the total text of the work in which they are quoted. Notice of copyright must appear on the title or copyright page of the work as follows: Scripture taken from the Holy Bible, New International Version, registered copyright 1973, 78, 84 by International Bible Society, used by permission of Zondervan Publishing House, all rights reserved. So you've got to put that right. if it's 500 over 500 words in whatever you're trying to get across. The NIV and New International Version trademarks are registered in the United States Patent and Trademarks Office, again by the International Bible Society, which proves that they're in the United States, right? And they own that patent and the copyright. When quotations from the NIV text are used in non-saleable media, that's like giving away free CDs, videos, etc., etc., such as church bulletins, orders of service, posters, transparencies, overhead projectors, or similar media, a complete copyright notice is not required. But the initials NIV must appear at the end of each quotation. Any commentary or other biblical reference work produced for commercial use or sale that uses the New International Version must obtain written permission for use of the NIV text. Permission requests for commercial use within the US and Canada that exceeded the above guidelines must be directed to and approved in writing by Zondervan Publishing House, etc. Permission requests for commercial use within the UK, EEC and IFTA countries that exceed the above guidelines must be directed to and approved in writing by Hodder and Stoughton Limited, a member of the Hodder Headline something group in London. Permission requests for non-commercial use that exceed the above guidelines must be directed to and approved in writing by International Bible Society in Colorado. Library of Congress Catalog, it's got all these numbers. Published by Zondervan and Publishing House, Grand Rapids, Michigan, USA. Printed in the United States of America. Okay, so it's all copyrighted to these people. You will be pleased to know that a portion of the purchase price of your new NIV Bible has been provided to International Bible Society to help spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. Yes, if that makes you happy, that's very nice. It says here, tribute to Edwin H. Palmer. Edwin H. Palmer, who had served so capably as Executive Secretary of the NIV Committee on Bible Translation and as Coordinator, etc., etc. He may have passed. So you can go and check out this guy's history. Edwin H. Palmer online. You might find it, you might not. Okay, it might be important to you, might not be. That's entirely up to you. But you've got to know who that guy is, you know, because he could be like a dodgy or something like that. You know, you just don't know. Give you clarity of mind, etc. Then you have the table of contents of the NIV. Right. All there. Right. Content maps, and then you've got the preface. A lot of these translations do have a preface and introduction, which most people just skip, right? They want to get to the scriptures and quote by rote, whatever, right? Try to convert whatever out there in the field. Okay, it states here, the International Version, the New International Version, is a completely new translation of the Bible, Holy Bible, right? It's a translation. It's done by translators, obviously, of the Holy Bible, made by over 100 scholars working directly from the best available Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek texts. Okay, nothing wrong there in that sentence. It had its beginning in 1965 when, after several years of exploratory study by a committee from the Christian Reformed Church and the National Association of Evangelicals, a group of scholars met at Palos Heights, Illinois, it's in the US, and concurred in the need. Okay, they all agreed that there needs to be a new translation of the Bible in contemporary English or modern English. This group, though not made up of official church representatives from these different denominations, etc., was trans-denominational. Like, it's the people of that church, but they're not like the hierarchy of it, right? The powers, the ones in total charge, right? Even though it was trans-denominational, its conclusion was endorsed, it was funded by a large number of leaders from many denominations who met in Chicago in 1966. Right, so they gave them donations, funding, etc., so they could do this project and bring forth this new translation. Responsibility for new version was delegated, it was appointed by the Palos Heights group to a self-governing. In other words, they made the rules, they monitored it, right, enforced certain rules, etc., etc., in order to bring this translation upon this committee. They were a group to a self-governing body of 15, the Committee on Bible Translation, composed for the most part of biblical scholars. Okay, these are people who go to find scholars, the ones who have undertaken the studies with that sort of stuff. Might be some semi-professionals or people with diplomas, degrees, maybe PhDs involved, from colleges. This is where they're coming from: colleges, universities, and seminaries. Okay. In 1967, the New York Bible Society, now the International Bible Society, generously undertook the financial sponsorship of the project, a sponsorship that made it possible to enlist the help of many distinguished scholars. Okay, so there's people who are recognized. Okay. The fact that participants, or people that took part, from the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand worked together gave the project its international scope, well, obviously. Okay. That they were from many denominations, including, take note of this, Anglican, Assemblies of God, Baptist, Brethren, Christian Reformed, Church of Christ, Evangelical, Free, Lutheran, Mennonite, Methodist, Nazarene, Presbyterian, Wesleyan, and other churches, helped to safeguard the translations from sectarian bias, or secondary bias, right? People adding their own flavour, twist, opinion, views to it, trying to sway the others to their way of thinking, right? Okay. How it was made helps to give the New International Version its distinctiveness. The translation of each book was assigned to a team of scholars. Next, one of the international editorial committees revised the initial translation. Okay? So they rewrote it, revised it, tweaked it, with constant reference to the Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. Their work then went to one of the general editorial committees, which checked it in detail and made another thorough revision. Okay, so it was revised yet again. This revision in turn was carefully reviewed by the Committee on Bible Translation. It's a group named that, Committee on Bible Translation, which made further revisions. So they revised it again, tweaked it, here and there again. Some things said, I thought, well, no, that's not right. Okay, it should be like this. During each of which the translation was examined for its faithfulness to the original languages and for its English style. So there they're saying faithfulness to the original languages, right? So that would be the original, ancient, or very old Assyrian Aramaic or Aramaic, the Tav Eshret, the original, ancient, or very old Tav Avri or Ivri, or the Hebrew. It would be faithful to the original language, Koine Greek or Attica Greek, ancient, original, ancient, very old, and so forth. Okay, but this is where they're pulling the wool over your eyes, because if they were, then they would be near exact to what this Aramaic translator Victor N. Alexander, native-born Aramaic-speaking Mesopotamian or Jewish descendant from Bet Narain, Mesopotamia or Syria, translated, from the original manuscripts and the original languages. The Assyrian Aramaic, let's say the Brita, the Lishana Artica Cypraea, the Aramaic, the Assyrian Aramaic, the Tav Eshret, right, into English, they would be very, very close to that, very, what they call akin. Like when you translated the Koine Greek, because that's basically what this was translated into, it would be akin to this original Aramaic. Not this modern Syriac or modern Hebrew, etc., because that's what the Aramaic is. It's the modern Syriac that's common. Everyone learns that and they boast, oh, I know it better than this guy, this translator says this wrong and this wrong, because I've got a degree and all this, I went to university, seminary, whatever, got this, so he's a fluent speaker, but I can speak better than that guy, right? He's all incorrect, but they don't realise that he's actually fluent in many of those dialects of Aramaic, even the Syriac, but he's also found a way to revive the long dead Ninevite Aramaic. So that's the difference there, and this is why he says it's the ancient, the original ancient or very old. It's because he's trying to differentiate that it's not the modern Syriac or the derivative or the later modern Galilean Aramaic. It's the very, very old, original, ancient. Okay? So he's found a way through the root words to revive those. Like people today don't speak Old Norse, Old English, Shakespeare speak, etc., etc. Right? Because they're long dead languages, so they possibly created a modern vernacular or a modern version, derivative, and that's what they're speaking. Right? Not the original ancient old languages, dead languages. Okay? So we just thought we'd bring that to your attention. Hopefully you understand that. You can do your own personal research on that, because a lot of rabbis and that actually admit that, oh yeah, okay, it's not the original ancient or very old Hebrew. It's a modified version. Some say it's actually Israeli Hebrew. Okay, similar, yeah, but just being modified in a lot of cases. Okay, go study that yourself. Don't take our word for it. Do your own personal research on that. But you'll probably find, if you go to Assyrian, people that speak the Aramaic, etc., etc., the top scholars, the experts, they'll probably tell you, yeah, that's right. It's all modern. So if some preacher tells you this is from the ancient old tongue, etc., etc., he's giving you false information. Because ask him, does he know the Kitab Eshret or Tav Eshret? Some of them might, like a rabbi, or so-called rabbi we came across, maybe a Spanish one, he said, yeah, I know that, that's the Hebrew we speak today. No, it isn't. Because that's modified. So if it was, then you would, be saying near exact what this translator, Victor N. Alexander, has translated, right? But you're trying to say it's from the ancient Hebrew, the very old Hebrew, but it's not. You're using the modified or the modern Israeli Hebrew. Okay. So from the beginning of the project, the Committee on Bible Translation held to certain goals for the new international version, that it would be an accurate translation. Okay, then if it was, why does it have errors, mistakes, contradictions? There are errors, mistakes, and contradictions. We can point them out, compare them with. We can compare this modern Americanized Bible version, right, with this ancient, this translation of the original ancient or very old Galilean Aramaic, right, hidden and preserved for 2,000 years by the Church of the East, right, and attested by the Revival Church, the Apostolic Orthodox Church of the East, through two translators, Victor N. Alexander, Andrew Gabriel Roth, a professor called James D. Franciscus, who has a doctorate, 2 doctorates in Aramaic, Hebrew, and possibly Greek. Right? He's a professor, so he's an expert. He's renowned. He's known. He's recognised as that expert. He's earned his stripes. Okay. And did we say Andrew Gabriel Roth, a translator of the Eastern Syriac Peshitta, the original from that same church, etc., etc. Yeah, they have pictures of the original manuscripts. One of them does on their site, Andrew Gabriel Roth's Aramaic Scriptures.com. Okay, has a picture of the Kaboris Codex there, right? And he goes on about the Mingana, the Yonanan or something, all these different codexes that he's looked at, right, to bring forth his translation of the ancient, the original ancient or very old Syriac Peshitta, bypassing the Western Peshitta and the Latin Vulgate, Septuagint, and all that sort of stuff. You have to go look at that site to verify that we're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Anyway, again, from the beginning of the project, the Committee on Bible Translation held to certain goals for the new international version, that it would be an accurate translation and one that would have clarity and literary quality, and so prove suitable for public and private reading, teaching, preaching, memorizing, and liturgical use. Reading it in your mass or in your church, right? Reading from it. The committee also sought to preserve some measure of continuity with the long tradition of translating the scriptures into English. Okay. Tradition of translating the scriptures into English. So there's a method that they use. Okay. They've been using for centuries. In working towards these goals, the translators were united. They were one in their commitment to the authority and infallibility. That means that they can't be wrong. Okay. What they state, etc., etc., is proven infallible. So it's correct. It's not incorrect. Okay. Now we can find fault in it. Of the Bible as God's word in written form. They believe that it contains a divine answer to the deepest needs of humanity, that it sheds unique light on our path in the dark world, and that it sets forth the way to our eternal well-being. There's no, you don't see any problem with that, because that's basically what it's about. Right? The first concern of the translators has been the accuracy of the translation and its fidelity to the thought of the biblical writers. They have weighed the significance of the lexical and grammatical details of the Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek texts. Okay, these would probably be the modified vernaculars, versions of those languages. At the same time, they have striven for more than a word-for-word translation, because thought patterns and syntax differ from language to language, because languages evolve over time. They change, they adapt, they adopt, etc. Faithful communication of the meaning of the writers of the Bible demands frequent modifications. Okay. These translations require frequent modifications in sentence structure and constant regard for the contextual meaning of words. Okay, there's a difference there between these modern Americanized versions, okay, and the ancient original Aramaic, or be it the Old Testament, Lishana Atika Sapreya, Assyrian Aramaic, Tab Esheret, that the Church of the East has, because they know they're people that know that language. They can read it, so they never had any need to go and translate it, make copies of copies of copies of copies of copies into other different languages, into English and other different languages all around the world. They just read it to the people in the church, and the people knowing the language understood it, right, and embraced it, etc. Right, so they never had to mess with it over the centuries. Right, even though they get persecuted, whether they run there, hide there, you know, because people like the Mongols, etc., the Kurds, Islam, etc., were persecuting them, in the Roman Catholic Church, etc., were persecuting them over the centuries. So as they ran, they still used those original scriptures, read from that, right, as original text given to them by the disciples, be it Mark Thomas, or Thomas, Thaddeus, I think his other name would have been Jude, something like that, or Peter and Bartholomew had their part in it as well, and founded those churches all over India, to China, to Japan. Okay, it's all in the historical records of the patriarchs. Okay, the Assyrian Church of the East. If you do the personal research and listen to the interviews coming out of the horse's mouth, right, and then you go do your personal research on it, verify it as true, let the evidence prove itself evident, prove that what they're saying is, what they're claiming is established fact, etc., etc. Right? They just sit there and go, oh well, no, that's rubbish. It's no this and that. You've never studied it. You've never done the personal research. You're trying to tell someone that has, this is, I speak it. I speak Aramaic, so I know it. When you don't, right, you probably only learnt the Syriac, which is a modern derivative or modern vernacular, right, of the original. Okay. If you did know the Aramaic, you would know the ancient old Tab Esheret, or Assyrian Aramaic, be able to translate it into English, like Victor N. Alexander, etc., etc. You don't know the idioms. If you don't know the idioms, fully understand them, the expressions that they use, right, you don't know the Bible as well as you think you do, or you claim to do, you do, or boast that you do. Okay, that's a quote directly from Professor James D. Francisco, with the 2 PhDs in Aramaic and Hebrew. We went to his video, asked him the question, didn't you quote this? If you don't know the idioms, or understand the idioms fully, you don't know the Bible as well as you think you do, or claim you do. And he said, yes, that's true. I did quote that, and yes, that's true. Okay? And asked him a question also. He thought we were playing games. And we asked him, we heard on a live stream some Hebrew Israelite saying God's name is Yahu Woo 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 or Yahu Washi 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 or whatever. Some stuff like that. Some names like that. Is it in the Hebrew as they claim? And he says, what's that rubbish? What the hell is that rubbish? It's not in the Aramaic or the Hebrew at all. It's a load of baloney, right? Okay. After he calmed down, he gave us that comment because he thought we were playing games, you know. Okay, so a sensitive feeling for style does not always accompany scholarship. Accordingly, the Committee on Bible Translation submitted the developing version to a number of stylistic consultants. 2 of them read every book of both Old and New Testaments twice, okay, once before and once after the last major revision, and made invaluable suggestions. Samples of the translation were tested for clarity or clearness and ease of reading by various kinds of people, young and old, highly educated and less well educated, ministers and laymen. Concern for clear and natural English, that the New International Versions should be idiomatic but not idiosyncratic, so they should have these expressions, right? Rather like the Aramaic scriptures that always at the bottom of it have the footnotes with the idiom, and then the translator explains what they mean. Sometimes they're kind of weird because you can't translate something from a language and it comes out perfectly. Like just next couple of examples. It's like in our New Zealand language, our Te Reo or Maori language, when you ask someone in that language, what is your name, it doesn't come out, what is your name? It comes out, your name who? Or something like that, right? Okay. Hopefully that's a helpful example. Until you correct it grammatically, etc., and put it into a easily read and understandable sentence, right? Okay. Concern for clear and natural English, that the New International Version should be idiomatic or expressive but not idiosyncratic. Look up that word, go and define that word. Contemporary but not dated. Motivated, the translators and consultants. At the same time, they tried to reflect the differing styles of the biblical writers. In view of the international use of English, the translators sought to avoid obvious Americanisms. Okay. American English is not UK English. Go ask a native-born Englishman. Okay, it's not even the Queen's English. Okay, so it's a American colloquial, possibly English, right? On the one hand, whereas our English in New Zealand is colonial based, Americans is probably colloquial. There's a lot of slang and stuff like that. To avoid obvious Americanisms on the one hand and obvious Anglicisms. Yeah, that'll be because Anglo is like related to English, right? Anglo-Saxon, etc. On the other, a British edition reflects the comparatively few differences of significant idiom and of spelling. You got idioms in English as well. Okay. As for the traditional pronouns, thou, thee, and thine in reference to the deity, is Shakespeare speak, used in the King James Version, etc. The translators judged that to use these archaisms, the old expressions, right, along with the old verb forms such as doest, wouldest, and hadst, would violate accuracy in translation. Yeah, because it causes confusion. Like if you say something like, "O King David, wherefore thou art thy," where are thee, thou, thou, under the bridge, right, or whatever. It's like confusing. Who speaks old Shakespeare speak? Or old Middle English, Old English, whatever. These days it's a long D language. So yeah, people who don't understand that Romeo and Juliet way of speaking will be confused, take it out of context. Take the meaning out of context. Okay, so as for the traditional pronouns thou, thee, and thine in reference to the deity, or God, the Godhead, the translators judge that to use these archaisms, along with the old verb forms such as doest, wouldest, and hadst, would violate accuracy in translation. Neither Hebrew, Aramaic, nor Greek uses special pronouns for the persons of the Godhead. There you go. A present-day translation is not enhanced by forms that in the time of the King James Version were used in everyday speech. Shakespeare's speech, whether referring to God or man. For the Old Testament, the standard Hebrew text, the Masoretic text, as published in the latest editions of Biblia Hebraica, that's the Hebrew books, right? The books of Hebrews, the Hebrews, was used throughout. The Dead Sea Scroll contains material being on an earlier stage of the Hebrew. Okay, so this Hebrew is probably a modified or Israeli Hebrew, something like that. It doesn't really indicate that it's the original ancient Tav Ivri or Avri or ancient or very old Hebrew. The Masoretic texts, you can go study those. You might find some that say, well, they were like this, they were like that. Okay, this is a bad translation because Hebrew and Aramaic had no vowels, even though A was there, apparently. I'm not too sure on this one. But yeah, pretty much, they didn't have vowels, they had consonants until somewhere along the way, perhaps the Masoretes added the vowels, which not only changed the structure of the language, it changed the meaning of the words. So Aramaic, the ancient, very old Aramaic, and the ancient, very old Hebrew were sister languages. Okay, this is a dispute between which one was first, which one was secondary, which one was the oldest, which one isn't, all that sort of stuff. Okay, it's not that important. But yeah, it changed not only the structure of the language, but also the meaning of the words. Because originally they had the same words, with the same meanings, but when vowels were added, etc., etc., it caused between the two languages to have the same word but different meaning, as in Euma, which means immeasurable period or unfathomable period, Eon, era, age or day with capital D, and Yom, which is the Hebrew for day, right? As in Yom Kippur, Yom Asher, etc.